Guess what? I actually did find the footage from the 28th of March that I thought that I had lost. I'm going to let it play here kind of in the background. It's work that we've seen before, and I do want to have it captured and demonstrated because I am documenting my build, but I thought this would be a good opportunity to get a little bit more detailed about some big mistakes that I made on the horizontal stabilizer and how you could potentially avoid making those same mistakes. And these are probably often lessons that will kind of benefit me, benefit you further down the line, because they're mistakes that you could probably make on any piece of material. As a reminder, I am a brand new builder, so when I started this, I've certainly worked with tools before, but not working like trying to build an aluminum airplane, you know, stuff around the house, working on motorcycles, working on guns, but not working on airplanes and lightweight aluminum type stuff. So that meant that I ended up with a tool chest full of tools that are very unfamiliar to me, and then building techniques that I would have to acquire. The plans that Vans provides, I think, are great. I mean, especially just coming in dead cold, scratch, and spending a little time trying to learn the language and still being able to build something that's going to be able to fly is pretty amazing. But throughout the process, I've learned that you will come to a point where you actually start to speak and understand the language where you hadn't before. And you'll know which questions or what the right questions are to ask to get to where you're going. So definitely early on, I was wallowing a little bit, and I'm very grateful to have the support of Vans Builder Support as a resource. So let's get into it. Some key mistakes with the horizontal stabilizer that I made would be precise measurement, confusing markings, my markings, disorientation, and creeping up on a close cut. So the first one regarded to precise measurements, when you're working with the two pieces of aluminum angle that sort of reinforce and splice the front of the forward spar together, you need to trim the ends of them so they taper. And the dimensions are given very clearly in the Vans instructions, how to measure it and where to make the cut. But the measurements are described being a certain distance from the end, and then on the end, the radius of it is just described as a 1/4 inch radius. And my error was not clearly understanding how to measure and mark the radius that I was going to be making. And so the first piece that I made, I really, you can see that, really messed it up. Not nearly enough edge distance on this part. The solution, or a simple solution, was understanding, of course, where the radius is measured from. And I think that what I did stupidly was I measured the radius from the wrong spot. And then when I was making the trim and the cut, I just cut it too close and it just got away from me. A simple solution though. In this instance, a 1/4 inch radius, just find a washer. Maybe that's hard to see, especially with that background. Find a washer with a 1/2 inch outside radius and use this as a template to basically draw that mark. So precise measurement, if you are unsure about it, just spend more time researching it and get it right, because once you take material off, you can't put it back on. That much is obvious. The next one is confusing markings. And what I mean by that is I did that part a second time, and I did a much better job of measuring the radius and making the trim. But you'll notice that there are two marks on this material. There's one right here, little blue mark. There's another one right here on the back. The difference between these two marks is 3/16 of an inch, maybe, a little bit more, but it's not much. It's certainly, if you're turning the part around and working on it, it would be easy to confuse them. This mark indicates basically the measurement for the taper. So the taper goes from this radius down to these points, and you cut the taper off. This mark indicates where the bend is to occur. And when I put this piece in between two blocks of wood, cinched it down, and lined up my bend mark to make my 6-degree bend, I bent it on the wrong mark, so the bend is in the wrong place. And I didn't have any confidence that I could straighten out this 6-degree bend and then put a clean one such a short distance behind it. Had I simply gotten rid of this mark once I was done making this cut, there would have been no confusion. And that's my point about confusing marks. If you're working on a piece of material and you marked it to make a cut, and you're done with that, get rid of that mark, especially if you're using other marks on that material. It can be costly. So, lesson learned. The next time I did this, oh look, I have it right here. The next time I did this, I made the trim, I got rid of the mark, I marked the bend line, made a beautiful 6-degree bend. It came out great, but I still have an X on here. And this is not attached to the airplane, which means I found another way to screw this one up, which is my third point, which is disorientation. When you're working with any of this material, you are going to be constantly flipping it over, turning it around all different directions, and you need to continually maintain an awareness of which way is up, forward, left, right, down, all of that. Marking a small piece of material is easy enough to do. Having the plans handy and double checking, triple checking that is also fairly easy to do, except that when you look at the plans, the orientation is sort of locked off. And so you might find yourself closing your eyes and walking around and putting your thumbs this way and that to make sure that you have a clear understanding that what you're looking at on the page matches what you're holding in your hand. With large assemblies, like the horizontal stabilizer, you're probably going to have them set up in a cradle on top of your workbench so that they're stable while you work on them. Unless your bench is only, 8 or 12 inches wide, you're probably going to move that part around a lot as well. And that was the error that I made with this in the process of flipping the horizontal stabilizer around, up, down, whatever, so that I could work on different parts of it. I kind of blindly reached across and clecoed this piece in place, and I clecoed it in upside down. And the holes lined up well enough that it could be clecoed in. And then later, and we saw this in the video, later I noticed that there were some holes that seemed like they should have been match drilled and they weren't. So instead of asking myself, why aren't those match drilled? I just drilled them. And when I disassembled the whole thing, I realized that I had the holes that were close but not quite, and ended up creating some really nasty oblong holes that are not repairable. Nothing you can do about them except for redo the part. That's how that happened. But that was a big mess up. Because I lost track of the orientation, I ended up ruining this part, and the forward spar, the half that occurred on, because of that mistake. So my advice when it comes to disorientation and maintaining proper orientation, mark the hell out of your parts, including the big assemblies. And I mean, don't mark it in a single spot, kind of mark it everywhere with a big Sharpie. If it's the whole assembly, mark it on the skin with a big Sharpie. The horizontal stabilizer looks symmetrical. If you're working on one, you know that it's not actually symmetrical. There's a definite top and a definite bottom, and save yourself some heartache. Put orientation marking on every piece. It comes off really easy with acetone, so when you're done with it, you're good to go. And that was really a huge mistake that occurred in December, and I didn't get back to working on it until March. Not because I had to wait on the parts, but because I got busy with life and I was working on other assemblies. So spare yourself the pain, and that orientation rule will serve you in every single piece that you're working. I'm starting on the wings right now. Those main spars are very expensive. I do not want to make a similar mistake with that. Next, let's see, that was disorientation. Now it's creeping up on a cut. The forward spars of the horizontal stabilizer have these tabs that get held together between the splice or reinforcement angles and then a doubler behind it. The doubler right here, I don't think was a part originally of the construction. This is a result of a service bulletin, so it was added later. And adding this to the assembly adds a lot of holes to that whole tie-in. You can see there are a ton of holes on this thing. Because of that, edge distance is at a premium. If you do need to add anything or make any changes, you have to be careful that you maintain enough edge distance, meaning if you're unfamiliar, the distance between the edge of a hole and the next edge of a hole has to be, as a rule of thumb, I think 1.5 times the diameter of the hole. This becomes important. The edge distance conversation becomes important when you're making the 6-degree bend in the tabs of the spars right here. You need to create these relief holes where the bend is going to occur. It doesn't come like this. The instructions tell you to make these some very precise, and they're very specific in it. It's not, they're not vague, but very precise measurements based off the radius of the flange, from the flange to the web of the spar, a certain distance off of that, a certain distance from the front and the back and wherever. Mark that, drill a number 30 hole as a sort of a pilot hole, flip the material over, and then from the what would be the forward side of the spar, widen that hole to 1/4 inch, and that's where it gets messy. Like I said, I've never done this before, and I didn't really realize all the tools that I had at my disposal, so I took a regular 1/4 inch drill bit like I would use for, putting holes on my walls. I don't know what I'd use a 1/4 inch hole for, but I used that, and it chattered like hell and just made a nasty hole that was really unusable, because you can see there's almost no edge distance between these two. So when I say creeping up on a cut, I mean that especially in a piece like this, where you have so much going on and edge distance as a premium, there's almost no margin of error on making that cut for those relief holes. And so if you get it wrong, you get it really wrong, and you end up reordering an entire spar. It's not an expensive piece of material, but the shipping on it is expensive. Although those cardboard shipping tubes, if you have a fire pit, they're pretty fun when they burn. My solution to this problem, and what I would recommend to you if you're not confident in making that using a drill the way that it's described in the plans, which, by the way, let me say really quickly, had I been more comfortable with the tools I had in my kit, I would have known that the right tool to use in that instance wouldn't be just an ordinary drill bit, but a unibit or step bit. I can't say for sure because I haven't used it in this instance. However, I believe that would have been the right tool for the job to get a clean cut right there. I didn't even want to mess with it. So what I did was, being that this doubler is part of the kit now, and the edge distance is virtually guaranteed, this is already cut to shape, I put the doubler in place over the material, and I used this shape of the doubler as a template. I knew that would guarantee me edge space, so I made the relief holes. And if I flip it around here, I hope you can see how far off these crazy relief holes are from that doubler. I think I did this, what I'm showing you right here, and that showed me not only how bad those holes were, but where the safe line was. So I simply used the doubler as a template, drew the lines out, and then took a Dremel and very slowly worked at removing that material, making sure not to violate the line that I had drawn, and then used a file to clean the whole thing up. And they turned out great. Again, why isn't this piece on the plane? these holes are so great. Well, there are also a bunch of big funky holes here because this spar was part of that whole debacle of disorientation and the splice angle that was installed upside down. So precise measuring, do it correctly, use a template whenever you can, get rid of any potentially confusing marks when they're no longer needed. Become obsessed with the orientation of the parts that you're working on and creep up on close cuts, especially where edge distance is a premium, and you have no margin of error, and it will save you a lot of heartache. That's gonna be it for this little save your ass and your money tutorial for the horizontal stabilizer of the RV-8, potentially useful for the RV-7. I think they have the same empennage assembly. But I do appreciate those of you who hung in and watched this. I hope that you find it helpful. I have found other builders' videos tremendously helpful for me. A couple that I would recommend right off the bat. Definitely if you're working on an RV-7 or RV-8 in the early stages would be Ryan Fly's. I'll put a link here in the description or something. But Ryan Fly's, he's building an RV-7A. His videos are great, and even though maybe he didn't make these mistakes, he definitely saved me a lot of trouble in other spots. And then another one, a guy building an RV-14, Ryan Emsinger. Yeah, I just really like his videos as well. So thanks for watching. Throw me a like or subscribe or both or whatever. There'll be more of these coming. This is a long project, so thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.